So I was talking with some of my viewers on a recent Twitch stream, and we got on a pretty controversial topic in Foxhole. There was a debate in the chat about what constitutes intelligence leaking and what should happen to players, specifically streamers, that leak intelligence for their faction. There's a lot of opinions out there about intel leaking in Foxhole, and for many new players, they may not even know what counts as intelligence leaking. So in this video, we'll take a look at what intel leaking is, share some examples, and talk about why it's so controversial within the community. And I'll end the video with giving you all my perspective on the issue. Before we get started, if you like the video and want to see more Foxhole related content, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. So to begin, we need to define what is intelligence leaking. Most players would agree that intel leaking is sharing your faction's intel to the opposite faction. Sounds clear enough, and yet this one issue has caused a lot of controversy for folks like myself who like to stream Foxhole. You see, in order to avoid leaking intelligence, some streamers will use a separate hide map scene and map it to whichever key pulls up the in-game map. That way they're able to see troop movements and defensive positions live, while the viewers can. That's been a solution for other games like Rust, where stream snipers will be able to find the server you're playing on and the specific location of your base. At that point, they'll grief your entire playthrough until you either quit or turn off your stream. This same concept occurs in Foxhole, where stream snipers can use your faction's intelligence to better identify weak points, or if you're streaming an operation, they'll attempt to grief it while watching your troop movements on stream. So essentially, intelligence leaking gives an unfair advantage to the enemy and negatively affects the faction who had their intel leaked. Players who share screenshots and discords belonging to the enemy faction or posting videos and pictures of base defenses in backline hexes could be considered intel leakers. Because of this, it's considered a reportable offense and some players have been banned for it. But Gremblo, I hear you say, you stream with the map uncovered. How come you're not banned? Great question, you smart, sexy son of a. There's a condition to intel leaking that has caused this issue to be so controversial, and that condition is intent. You see, if a streamer equips a radio and is clearly showing intelligence for the purpose of griefing and providing an unfair advantage to the enemy, then it shows malicious intent and it should be a bannable offense. This would also be considered alting behavior, which we can cover in a separate video, but if the intent of the player, whether they're streaming live intel or sharing it with the enemy team, is to directly hurt their own faction, give the enemy faction an edge, or just plainly troll and grief, that player would definitely receive a ban. Because of this condition regarding what was the intent of the player that leaked intel, there's been a greater discussion about what is a bannable offense for intel leaking. Some overzealous players would say any and all intel leaking should be a bannable offense. Regardless of intent, there are systems in place and ways to prevent intel leaking that any reasonable streamer should implement if they choose to stream Foxhole. Additionally, because of the greater impact intel leaking has towards the faction, other players and regiments may be caught in the crossfire when intel leaking occurs. Whether we like it or not, Foxhole is a social game with thousands of players playing on both factions. That's potentially thousands of players that feel the negative effect when intel leaking occurs. On the other hand, players and streamers that do show their maps would argue that there's a narrative component when showing live troop movements. People who tune into a Foxhole stream want to feel invested in the ongoing battle. When the map is hidden, they're not able to tell whether the streamer is winning or losing and the greater impact this battle is having for that particular section of the hex. These same players would also argue that showing the live intel of a frontline battlefield isn't a negative impact given the fact that the enemy is already there and can see the enemy's movements. The only time it becomes a potential issue is if a streamer is leaking a sneak attack or flank against the enemy. But now that we know what intel leaking is, some examples of intel leaking, and why it's so controversial, what's my perspective on the issue? For me, I show my map on every stream without a hide map scene. That being said, I did try to implement a hide map scene and hide intelligence on 3 separate occasions. The first time, I'll admit, I didn't set up the hotkeys correctly, and there were times when the hide map screen was showing longer than I wanted to, which resulted in missed footage. The second and third time I tried this, I implemented the scene correctly, but I would keep having the hotkey on the back of my mind and making sure I pressed the correct key in order to hide or unhide the intelligence view. This took away from my experience having fun in game and put more focus on pressing the right keys. So I got rid of the hide map scene and now show live intelligence, but within reason. If I'm viewing the entire map or multiple hexes, I'll stay in the secure map mode by pressing N. This way, I'm not leaking any troop movement. If I'm on a frontline battlefield, I'll show the live intelligence but make sure I'm zoomed in as close as possible and stay away from any operations occurring in the hex. If I do join an operation on stream, I avoid viewing the map entirely or limit my uses as much as possible. Basically, I try not to be an idiot with intel leaking, and I'm instead focusing on being an idiot on the front line. There's also a few other issues when it comes to intel leaking that many players aren't considering, starting off with smart players with an alt account. These players will typically sit in their home region and go to one of the intelligence tents on the island. From there, they can see live troop movement and base locations, allowing them to share that intel with their allies on the enemy faction. Another issue are these overzealous players themselves who are itching to ban anyone for the slightest hint of intel leaking. A prime example of this occurring is when a regiment will mass report a smaller group of players or individual players they don't like for intel leaking. This occurrence is unfortunately more common than you might realize, but it's something that the dev team themselves need to address. And they could do that by either removing intel leaking as a reportable offense entirely, or stipulating more clearly what is considered intel leaking. Ultimately, you guys, let streamers decide for themselves if they want to hide their map or not. Both factions agreed that malicious intel leaking is bad for the game and should be punished, and I agree with them just the same. But that's just my opinion on the topic. What do you guys think? Should all instances of intel leaking be met with a ban? Are streamers ruining Foxhole? And should Helping Hands dress up as Theomaro when the air update drops? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Let me know if you're interested in seeing a video where I cover alting or any other hot button issues in Foxhole. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you all in the next one.
That gangster dick gon' turn me on. That boy know how to do it, daddy. Get me out that thong, Don't get me wrong, I'll date a bitch, but his little asshole taking dick. You know he pull up spanking shit. Dick some if you love me, lick some if you love me, huh?